The Sound Off Podcast. The show about podcast and broadcast. Starts now.
Anna Z has been rocking the Atlantic middays on Q104 since the late 80s. Now, strangely, I've never met her. But like everything else in radio, our paths should have crossed at least a half dozen times. I've often wondered, she's so talented, she could have gone to just about any city in North America to work. But she stayed in Halifax, and I wondered, what keeps her there? Is it the music scene? The beauty of the city? Those delicious donaires? Yes, to all of those. When I was 18, I learned from her. I listened to her breaks and how well crafted they were for what was known as album-oriented radio. And while the Misty Moon on Gottingen Street is no more, Anna Z told me recently, Argyle Street is still a thing, and the Carlton should be your first Google if you're headed to Halifax to check out a show. And now, Anna Z joins me from Halifax.
How long have you been doing radio?
44 years. 44 years, January 1st, 1988. I did my first shift at CFRC, Queen's University radio station in Kingston, Ontario.
And what'd you go to Queen's for?
I didn't go to Queen's. I was still in high school.
Oh, so you're originally from Kingston.
I'm originally from Kingston, and it was something that I always wanted to do, radio, and I ended up volunteering at Queen's University. I would take the bus at 6 a.m., go practice and train, and then I would go to school during the day. And January 1st, 1988 was my first radio show.
Okay, this is going to escalate quickly because at the end of 1988, I think I'm listening to you out east. Is that possible?
I'm sorry. 1981. January 1st, 1981 was my first shift. So, yeah.
Where did you go after Kingston?
So I ended up working one shift a week at CFRC. And then I called up CKLC in Kingston, which was my favorite radio station. And I just asked to go for a tour and went for a tour. And I said, what you always say when you really want to get into radio, I'll take the garbage out. I'll do whatever. I'll volunteer, whatever you got. And William Bell was the program director of CFLY at the time. And later that night, I got a call saying, hey, do you want to work here part-time? All that jazz with Don Robinson. And from there, it's been radio all my life, practically.
And you're getting in like 1981, a little bit of a slow year music-wise, but the records really begin to take off in 1982. We sort of get inundated with all this great music that just sounds wonderful on both AM and FM radio. So did you love the music or did you love the medium or did you love both?
I loved the music initially. My father was a construction worker by day, and at night he would fix electronics. So we had boom boxes, and I had a 4-track reel-to-reel machine when I was a kid. We had all kinds of music in the house, whether it was opera, my parents being Italian, we had classical. I was exposed to everything. So I loved all kinds of music. So music initially. And then one day I was watching, I don't know what show it was, and there was a radio DJ. This was prior to WKRP, and something just clicked. It's like, that's what I want to do. And ever since then, I had worked towards doing that.
So tell me about the connection to WKRP, because I look back at that show and like, they just knew what was going on inside radio stations. Was there a character on the show that you could relate to?
I liked Bailey. Bailey was the one I liked a lot. I mean, for me, it was just a show. I just enjoyed it for the comedy and wasn't really inside radio at the time. And then when I got into radio, it was like, wow, this is a whole nother level of comedy because a lot of this stuff has happened.
Doesn't Jan Smithers, who played Bailey, have a connection to Halifax?
She used to live here. She was married to James Brolin, and they lived in Cape Breton. And I guess once they broke up, she moved to Halifax for, I think it was the late 80s. And then she ended up moving to the U.S.
Where did your adventures take you after Kingston?
So in Kingston, I was working at CFLY Opping. Then I started to take the 2-year program at Loyalist College in Belleville and started working at CJBQ in Belleville, Ontario. And from there, I was working part-time. I would come home and work weekends at CKLC. And then after my shift on Saturday nights, I would head over to CFRC and do a show there. And I ended up getting a job in Moncton at Rock 103. So the station hadn't been on the air yet, but I got a call from Larry McCaw, who's the program director, and asked me if I was interested in the gig. The station hadn't been on the air yet. And I thought this is a really good opportunity to go there and put a station on the air. And it was so much fun. Larry McCaw was the program director. Paul Wiggins was the music director. And I was there for about 8 months. And then I got a call from Bob Powers, who was the program director of Q104 at the time, and asked me if I was interested in a job at Q. So after that, I was in Halifax the whole time. Been here 37 years.
Yeah, the Moncton experience, Rock 103, that 103.1, that's, great signal that would just beam into Nova Scotia and all the way north. And then you find yourself in Halifax.
Yeah, and Rock 103 was interesting because I had come from, it was St. Lawrence Broadcasting, owned by Jimmy Waters and his siblings, so it was really Chum. And Chum was very formatted and clocks and all that. Going to Rock 103, where there was no format, you could play whatever the hell you wanted to. And it certainly was different from what I was used to. And I didn't really know rock at the time. I was more of a pop music person. I was AM radio, top 40. And boy, I got to learn so much at Rock 103.
Well, the mid-'80s in terms of new rock wasn't a ton, right? I look back at like 1985, for instance. And 1985 was it was all the people who had been in rock bands who were releasing records. So there was like some Glenn Frey stuff out there, and Don Henley had a solo record. And Paul Rogers had a solo record, and Stevie Nicks had lots of solo records. And it was all solo records from bands who weren't actually active. So it was a bizarre time. I totally understand. But then you get to Q104. And this had been on, I guess if I'm using my math here, it's been on the air for 4 years. I think it started in 1984. You're getting there sometime.
83, November 83. And I got there in January of 88.
So it's 5 years old. So it's heritage. There's traction. And, my impression from listening to the radio station was it was a real rock station. It had some force behind it. It had personalities. Unbelievable personalities. And of course, you being one. So when you get to the station, how did you get in and find you and be you from the first year?
Well, got to thank Doug Caldwell, who was our music director at the time. He's passed away a couple of years ago, but sorely missed for sure. And he was so passionate about music. And I learned so much about him from, David Bowie, REM. He was just a music encyclopedia. And I thank him a lot for the knowledge that I was able to gain. And just the guys that were there, it was Mike McFarland, JC Douglas, Bob Powers. I mean, these guys were just fantastic. And they really took me in, and I fit right in with the whole gang and the mindset and the vibe. And the only other station I found that was very similar as far as a tight-knit group was CKLC in Kingston with Greg Hunter, Jim Elliott, Gord Taylor, Chris St. Clair, Chris Ryan, Scott Jackson. I mean, these guys were awesome. And that was how it was here as well. And so it made me stay. It's like a family.
And tell us about the view from Queen Square.
Every artist that came in, from Alice Cooper to Eddie Money, whoever came to town was blown away by the 19th floor penthouse view. We were on the Dartmouth waterfront, overlooking Halifax. And I mean, the views were just incredible. In fact, brother Jake got married there. I wasn't there for that one. And another announcer, Gord Johnson, also got married on the balcony while I was on the air.
It's just unbelievable because it would also, I think there were IDs as well from the top of Queen Square. And I thought, this feels big.
It was. I mean, it's the best studio we've ever had, no question. And I have to say one time, so this would have been my first live interview, and Mike McFarland was doing afternoon Saturdays, and we had switched shifts because he was a huge Iron Maiden fan. And I said, yeah, no problem. Go to the show. Great. He's going to interview Bruce Dickinson. So all of a sudden it's 6:00 and Mike's going off to the show. And he says, yeah, they didn't call. He didn't show up. So then I get a call from the local EMI rep, Barry Kent at the time. And he says, hey, Anna, I've got Bruce Dickinson on the phone and we're coming up for the interview. I'm freaking out because first of all, I haven't prepped for this interview. I'm like, I know nothing about Iron Maiden. And Canadian Music Express back then had them on the cover. So I'm just trying to, what can I learn in like 2 minutes to find out? Anyway, the interesting thing about being on the 19th floor is I had to put on like Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin to take the elevator to go all the way downstairs to see if Barry and Bruce were there. They weren't there. Then go all the way back up because back then there were no cell phones. So I think I ended up putting Freebird on after that. Anyway, they finally come upstairs and I just was so honest with Bruce. I said, listen, Bruce, I wasn't supposed to do the interview. I apologize. I really don't know anything about you. I'm so sorry. And he said, don't worry, love. I talk a lot. And he was awesome.
You mentioned Barry Kent. I know Doug Caldwell went into do music as well. I think of people like Alwyn Ross from Polygram. I think of the record companies who in the past didn't have to make the trip out east, but because Q104 was there and also maybe Rock 103 in Moncton, that became trips for the record reps to go out east to sell records. It was a big deal. And I think Halifax, picked up and became a concert spot. And now I'm just remembering, wasn't there a petition to bring Rush to Halifax?
Yes, that's right. And I wasn't there for that. That would have been J.C. Douglas, Jeff Woods, Rock and Ray Plourde, Mike McFarland, that era. I just missed that era. And there's video. I think Mike McFarland has that up on YouTube. But it was pretty exciting. And people still talk about that to this day.
But bands coming by was not uncommon. And the other thing that I still hear you talking because I had to work to listen to your show. So I was at Acadia University. So I had to put up some tinfoil on an antenna, but I was already at the top of Kroll Tower. So the signal could just get over the hill. But one of the things that I really liked was how you introduced records, like, for instance, like The Fix, introducing a song like from the album Calm Animals. And, just giving enough about the record to make me care enough to listen to the song. Because that's what it was. I mean, it was AOR, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And it got away from it as the era went on. But, Doug Caldwell, again, would have been instrumental in the choice of music that we were playing.
Talk about the pivot into the 90s and the station and you. It changes. That AOR kind of drifts away. And for most rock stations, it did. So what was sort of the next sort of period or era and how you introduce songs and how you present, the radio station?
Well, it was an interesting time because at the time we had Barry Horn as our program director, and he was looking to get more of a female audience because we were pretty heavy, and changed the logo, which is actually not one of my favorite it's actually my least favorite of our two logos. And we were playing Cher. We were playing the Rankin Family. It was a bizarre time. And I know a lot of us would skip over some of the songs that would come up, but it didn't really change. I've always been more of all about the music and the artist, and not in bio form, but it's just a neat little nugget of information. Like a one line, couple of lines or something, just to hook people and to be interested in hopefully the song or the artist, make them think about it in a different way.
Well, as you know, the internet is undefeated. I do believe that there is an ad featuring J.C. Douglas that circulates from that era. I'm going to put it on the blog page just so that anybody can sort of, I'll contrast the two sort of eras. But what do you think the lesson is about, a radio station and a brand when it gets just a touch too far away from what people believe that it is?
Well, it's interesting because we did get bigger numbers in ratings because of it, but it really wasn't on brand, with the station, with our listeners. And it's good that we ended up getting away from that after that and dropped all of the shares. And not that there's anything wrong with Cher and the Rankin family. They're great, but not really a good fit for Q104 sonically. And I just think, we ended up getting, after Barry Horn, it was Bruce Morrell. Once Eric Stafford came in, things kind of went back to not the beginning of Q, but a little bit more mainstream for sure.
Yeah, I love having these conversations. I know it expands many, many decades and we're touching on stuff, but I think Eric Stafford, he was at Rock 103 and then he came in and did such a great job at Q104. He went to Ottawa, I believe, later as the general manager. So yeah, I sort of see that period with Eric being a very, very stable period for Q. And you got me thinking is kind of like, okay, so your numbers do go up, but what good is it if it's everybody's second favorite radio station?
Well, we became number one. I mean, that was the thing. It was a monster. And so the ratings did show that listeners were digging it. And here's the thing, with Q104 being a heritage station, I mean, to this day, if any of us are out and about, whether it's a remote or, doing an appearance, listeners always come up and say, I remember where I was when Q104 first signed on in 1983, and they were in high school generally, or, my dad had the radio on. And it's such a neat feeling to the point where they think that I was there right at the beginning. And I'm like, no, I wasn't there right for that part of it with Bro Jake and Hal Harbour and everybody. But it really speaks to the listeners and their loyalty to the station. And that connection, I've never found that anywhere.
Transcription of the Sound Off podcast is powered by the Podcast Super Friends, 5 podcast producers who get together to discuss podcasting. Sharpen your podcast and creation skills by following the show on the Sound Off Podcast YouTube or Facebook page. The Sound Off Podcast with Matt Kundle.
I think Halifax, Q104 is probably one of the first 3 things I would think of when I think of Halifax. And there's a lot of great things about Halifax.
It's a great city. I'm from Kingston, Ontario, and Kingston is beautiful. I love Kingston. And Halifax is just a little bit bigger, but it's got the same vibe. It's a university town. It's on the waterfront, and people are so friendly. It's just great.
But there's more that's kept you there. I mean, I think you're underselling it just a touch because you've been there for so long. But what is it that makes it? I mean, it could be Kingston, but it's a bigger lake. I mean, there's so much to it. And you kind of pinpoint it. It's a young town.
It is. And for me, I have had opportunities to go to different stations, but it was just, to me, it was about the city. I love this city so much. And the station, I mean, even through the ups and downs over the years, because it certainly hasn't been perfect, but there was always that core group of people that got you through the bad times. And we just have such great people. And, BJ Wilson, our morning guy, has been here over 30 years. Tom Bedell. And a lot of these guys, actually, Tom Bedell, who does afternoon drives, left, came back. Same with BJ Wilson. Bobby Mack, who's the co-host, left, came back. JC Douglas, left, came back, left, came back. And so it speaks to the station that you definitely want to be here and be part of the whole family. I mean, you hate to say family, but it really is. We know each other so well. I spend so much time with these guys and they are my friends. So that to me is number one. Plus, I love doing middays. I love being music director. I love the shift. It's the best shift in the world. You can go out at night. You don't have to get up so early. And kudos to everyone who does that because that is tough to do the morning show.
Yeah, I always think it's the hardest job out there to come up with live content 4 hours a day for 5 days a week. I find just the hour of the day to come up with content just a little bit nuts. I loved afternoon drive. I was gathering content from the minute I woke up and I could execute it at 2:00. I thought that was the best. But you're pointing out that 10 to 3 is the time, and maybe that's your time. And 10 to 3 that's a haul because you've got lunchtime in the middle. And I'm going to ask you a few questions that involve music, but tell me about that shift, because 10 to 3 I felt it was quite regimented for many years. And now it's changed. It feels more transient. There's a lot more coming and going. We used to be sort of stuck in an office. And, were there phases to it? Like, did the pandemic completely disrupt that?
Oh, big time. I think there were more listeners in middays during the pandemic because people weren't getting up and going to work. And so they would have the station on in the background while they're working from home. And yeah, it was a crazy time for sure. And there were no cars. Like in the morning, you wouldn't see anybody on the road. So that definitely would affect listenership, to morning radio.
I don't want to say when did it start or when did it stop. I don't even know. But is the electric lunch still going?
It is.
Yeah. So tell me about that evolution.
It's evolved over the years for sure. Different features. The electric lunch started with J.C. Douglas when he became program director back in 2000. It used to be called the Wax Museum with Jerry McNeil, who was the midday announcer at the time. And then I ended up getting the job. So when JC came in around 2000, that's when we started implementing the electric lunch. We feature a classic album. We used to run Paul Schaefer's Day in Rock. It was more of a flashback type of show. But things have evolved, as, your audience ages, you kind of move up in eras. So it's not as classic as it used to be. We have a 90s on demand, 90s is big. So we just move with whatever's going on. And I have the block of rock, have a theme. So I have listeners suggest the different themes, try to have 3 songs that tie together,
I know you've got your eye on, the music department when you got there and you mentioned Doug Caldwell and then the evolution of it going forward. I sort of see there was a period when, record reps would come by with the music and we would, decide whether or not to playlist it. And then the record reps kind of went away and it started to be delivered over the internet and we lost that contact a little bit. And I kind of feel for new rock bands because I think the minute that Spotify showed up and we had access to an entire back catalog, if you release a new record, you're going up against the entire back catalog, not spots on a radio station playlist. So I kind of saw, it's going to be really tough to play new records when you have an entire back catalog. And the other thing I sort of think about is I think about you, Anna Z. In 1989, it was September. I was just driving down the 101 and all of a sudden, I think you came on and you introduced Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood. And there's a collection of songs in my lifetime. I can remember the first time I heard it and then I have to turn up the radio and go, what is that? Fast forward 30 years, the last time I was in Halifax, you introduced it again. And I had to tell my now wife, I said, you don't understand what this moment is. This is so cool. This is the same station with the same person who introduced it the first time I ever heard the song.
That's wild.
Yeah. She lost faith in me that day. She thought I needed help.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that's bizarre to hear that.
I felt that I needed to share that one particular story with you because of the, the introduction of songs over the time period. But share a little bit with me about the Halifax music scene because, a period in the 90s, we all had, it was all eyes on Sloan. I think Sarah McLachlan's come out of that region. Joel Plaskett.
Matinees, Rush Hermit. Yeah, there were quite a few bands. And speaking of new music, just to circle back to that, local bands, homegrown bands do get played on Q104. Tom Bedell hosts a show called Route 104, which is nothing but homegrown music. And so it really does shine a spotlight on our local bands. And frankly, they're the ones that really need the exposure.
What's the live music scene like?
It's fantastic. It's not as great as it used to be back in, like the Sloan era when Seattle came knocking and we were like, Seattle East. But live bands still play and, unfortunately not as many clubs to support it. But there's some really good ones like the Marquee Club, the Lighthouse Arts Museum. They bring in bands. And yeah, there's Monty's over in Dartmouth that play local bands. And then there are a few bars as well. But, it's funny how things have shifted because you've got kids today that are more into, the DJ scene and that whole thing. So it's funny because I was judging a Battle of the Bands contest at the Seahorse and came out of there and there was a lineup, pay to go in to watch a DJ and to dance. And that's what kids seem to be into.
Tell me about radio this decade. Have you had to change a lot about how you present and what you do compared to like the previous 30 years that you'd been on air? Because it's fast now. We got the TikToks and the kids have access to the Spotify and we can all listen in different particular ways. How has that changed the way you do your work every day?
Well, I think social media is playing a big part of that, and it takes up a lot of time. The thing with social media that I find what you can do is it's a good companion to what you're doing on the air. So it adds to it, and you can reach another segment of the audience that way, where you can talk about something and then send them over to Facebook, Instagram, whatever you're doing. And I think that has helped, but you do have to adapt to what's going on. I mean, you can't just ignore, TikTok or any of these social media sites because this is what is happening.
Do you have a favorite?
I'm not on TikTok, but I do, if someone sends me links, I will look at it. I like Instagram, Facebook. Those tend to be my favorites. But here's the thing is, for me personally, I don't post a lot. It's all about the station. I put everything on the Q site. So occasionally I'll post something on my personal pages, but I'm not one for doing that personally.
Most memorable interview?
Well, Bruce Dickinson definitely has to be one of them. Eddie Money was another one where our sales guy at the time, Ron Blomers, happened to be at a mall and he ran into Eddie Money and he said, "Hey, why don't you come to our radio station, come in for an interview?" And he came over and it was awesome. He's such a good guy and loved the patio. And yeah, so that was one of the favorites. Peter Frampton was great. Paul Schaefer, Jim Gaffigan. I don't do as many interviews as I used to, but those would be some of the highlights for sure.
What do you do after work? What do you love that's not radio?
Baking, cooking. Very passionate about that. Swimming. I go swimming every day at 5:30 in the morning and hang out with friends. I'm into Formula One. I've got a good group that we get together, prepping for the next day, show prep, all that stuff.
So if you love Formula One, do you go to Montreal for the event?
I don't. I haven't been, but it would be great. I'd like to go to Monza. I'd like to go to Italy. I'd like to go to, Mexico to catch one of those races for sure. Do you watch it?
Nope. I'm a Montrealer. And so when I would circle that weekend and then leave town, I mean, nothing against F1. It was noisy. My favorite bars on Crescent Street were generally jammed with people I didn't necessarily want to hang around with. So it just felt a little too Euro. And with that said, I'm going to be leaving for Europe next week. I'll be gone for 6 weeks.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it was just sort of an invasion of space. Listen, there were various events in Montreal that I just had to leave town for. Like they used to have like this Tour de Lille for the bicycles. And I was like, I got to get out of town. I can't be around this. It's no way. Carafet Parade. I'd love to sponsor the event and be part of it, but I have to leave town for this particular thing. But Halifax has a bunch too that I love. Fringe Festival. No, Busker Festival. Is it Busker?
Yeah, Buskers. But I feel Buskers is in a lot of towns, isn't it?
No.
I know Kingston has it. Like Moncton had it at one point. Like when it first came here, it was new, it was different and stuff. And now, I mean, unless I have people coming down to go to it, I don't, as you do when you live in your own city, right? I just don't get out of town for it.
Tell me about the major concert scene. I find that for many years, it's been Moncton, Magnetic Hill, that area that has been the big draw with the U2s and, all the way, way back when the Beach Boys are coming. Rolling Stones did a big show there, but not Halifax.
Well, we did have the Rolling Stones, and I think it was 2006, something like that, outdoor festival. That was huge. And then we ended up getting Paul McCartney on the Commons, which was amazing, and Kiss.
Yeah, I was going to just ask briefly about what it feels like is being isolated. It's a 14-hour drive if you want to drive from Montreal. It's equally as long if you want to just cut through the States. And it's an hour and a half by plane. So a lot of people don't sort of equate all that stuff, but there must be periods when it feels less isolated than others, depending on whether the Stones come.
Oh, that was so amazing. And I believe the Stones actually were the ones that led the way for other bands to come here because of that. But again, after the fiasco with what was happening with the city, that didn't happen. But man, yeah, you're right. And people, bitch about that. We don't get any concerts. And you basically have to fly away, go to Toronto, go to Montreal, go to Boston if you want to see some shows. And fortunately, it's not very far to go, plane ride away.
But it's also why we love it.
Yeah, it's the best.
We're doing this on a Saturday. I don't mean to sort of say, well, what are you looking ahead to do and to talk about, and what's going to be the feel of your show on Monday?
The weekend is just starting. So whatever happens, I'll be looking to read up on and do show prep on. And, I'm going out tonight with some friends for dinner. We'll see what happens. I haven't started doing any show prep.
Good. You confirmed something for me because, my wife looked at me and she said, how come you're not a bigger SNL fan? And I said, because it was Saturday night. I wasn't going to be around on Monday when I did my show.
Right. Although that SNL 50th was really good, wasn't it?
It was awesome. Anna, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. This is a bucket list episode for me. Thank you so much for doing it.
Well, it's nice to finally meet you. I heard so many good things about you, and you do such a fantastic job with your podcasts. And man, I've learned a lot and enjoyed and been entertained listening to some of your guests, and it's great. And I hope you have a great time in Spain.
Absolutely. Tap is all around, everyone.
Cheers.
The Sound Off podcast is written and hosted by Matt Kundle. Produced by Evan Serminski. Edited by Taylor McLean. Social media by Aiden Glassy. Another great creation from the Sound Off Media Company. There's always more at soundoffpodcast.com.